18 hours before my wedding, my father called and told me he would not be walking me down the aisle. A week earlier, he had texted me, "Can't believe I finally get to walk my little girl down that aisle." I still had the message saved on my phone. But now he was backing out because my older sister said watching him walk beside me would be too painful for her. My mother got on the phone and told me I was 30 years old, not a little girl, and that, if walking 50 feet alone could ruin my wedding, then I had bigger problems than she knew how to fix. So the next afternoon, my father sat comfortably near the front of the chapel while the doors opened behind him. He expected to watch me enter alone. Instead, every head in the room turned when they saw the silver-haired man holding my arm. My father half rose from his seat before catching himself. My mother leaned toward him and whispered, "Richard, who is that?" My sister stared at us in her almost white dress and muttered, "You have got to be kidding me." The man beside me was someone my father had spent 27 years pretending no longer mattered. And when Dad saw him walking me down the aisle, he finally understood that the daughter he had always expected to stand alone had stopped waiting for him to show up. My name is Emily Lawson Parker. I was 30 when this happened, and if you had met my family before my wedding, you probably would have described us as close. We lived outside Franklin, Tennessee, where people knew one another from church Little League school fundraisers and the same grocery stores they had been shopping at for 20 years. My father, Richard Lawson, owned Lawson Home in Millwork, a successful local cabinet and flooring showroom with a warehouse, a small installation crew, and a little over 20 employees. He wasn't a millionaire with a private jet. He was the kind of businessman who drove a 3-year-old pickup, knew most customers by first name, and spent Sunday mornings shaking hands in the church lobby. My mother, Diane, lived for keeping everything polished. She organized church luncheons, hosted Christmas dinners, remembered everyone's birthdays, and posted family photographs online with captions about gratitude, tradition, and togetherness. If you only saw the pictures, you would have thought we were exactly the kind of family people hope to marry into. But in our family, togetherness usually meant making sure my older sister Brooke was comfortable. Brooke was 4 years older than me, and for as long as I could remember, my parents treated her emotions like weather warnings. If Brooke was upset, everybody adjusted. If Brooke was angry, somebody else had caused it. If Brooke was jealous, we were expected to be sensitive. And if I ever complained, my parents used the same explanation every time. "Emily, you're stronger than she is." When I was 13, I won a regional writing contest. The award ceremony happened on the same Friday Brooke's boyfriend broke up with her. My father promised he would still come. 20 minutes before the ceremony, Mom called and said Brooke was in pieces, and they didn't feel right leaving her alone. My English teacher took the photograph of me holding my plaque. When I got home, Dad said, "You know we're proud of you," and Mom asked me not to talk too much about the award because Brooke had finally calmed down. When I graduated college, Brooke had an argument with her fiancé the night before. Mom spent the morning in Brooke's apartment. Dad arrived halfway through the ceremony and later complained that parking had been terrible. Brooke didn't come. When I was promoted at work, Mom congratulated me and then spent the next 15 minutes explaining how Brooke had always been more naturally social and that career success wasn't everything. For years, I accepted all of it because being the strong one sounded better than being the unwanted one. Brooke eventually married Chase Whitmore. Chase ran a small renovation business around Williamson County. He was charming, ambitious, and very good at making ordinary things sound impressive. If he renovated a $280,000 bungalow, he called it a residential redevelopment. If he handled 3 kitchens in 1 month, Brooke posted online about his project portfolio. When he bought a used Ford F-250, she photographed it in a field at sunset and wrote, "Building our empire one project at a time." Dad loved Chase. At family dinners, he asked Chase about business before he asked me how work was going. He invited Chase to supplier lunches and began introducing him as the next generation. Brooke loved hearing it. I lived in Nashville and worked as a regional facilities manager for a company that operated senior living communities across Tennessee and Kentucky. It wasn't glamorous, but it was a serious job. I coordinated renovations vendor contracts, emergency repairs, equipment replacements, and maintenance budgets across multiple properties. I knew contractors. I knew suppliers. I knew what projects actually cost and which people returned phone calls when something went wrong at 2 in the morning. My parents never really understood what I did, or maybe they didn't want to. Dad told people I worked in an office. Mom said I handled maintenance stuff. Brooke once introduced me to one of Chase's friends by saying, "Emily is basically the person you call when the air conditioning breaks." I used to laugh along because correcting people felt arrogant. That was part of my problem. I spent years pretending things didn't hurt, so nobody could accuse me of being difficult. Worse, I had become good at being needed. I told myself I helped because I was generous, and mostly that was true. But there was another truth I didn't understand until much later. Being needed felt close enough to being loved that I stopped asking whether there was a difference. That was why, when Dad's business hit a difficult year, I became the person he called. He had badly injured his shoulder unloading cabinet samples. Around the same time, one of his biggest builder accounts went under. Orders slowed. His inventory system was a mess. The website still looked like it had been built in 2009, and customers couldn't request estimates online. One Thursday night, Dad called me at almost 10. "Your mother doesn't know how bad things are." No greeting, no asking whether he had woken me. Just a problem. I drove down after work the next Thursday. Then the Thursday after that. For almost 6 months, I sat in the little office behind the showroom, helping his employees clean up inventory spreadsheets, organize purchasing, and create a simpler way to track incoming orders. I helped them update the website and set up online estimate requests. When my employer needed cabinetry and flooring bids for several apartment renovations, I told our purchasing team that Lawson Home and Millwork was worth considering. Dad's company won some of those jobs because his prices were fair and his employees were good. I didn't hand him free money. I didn't secretly save an empire. I simply helped my father when he was scared. That distinction mattered to me. Apparently, it mattered less to him. At Christmas that year, Mom was telling relatives how modern the showroom had become. "Chase has really helped Richard understand what younger customers want," she said proudly. I looked at Chase. I had visited the showroom a handful of times, mostly to borrow trailers and negotiate discounts. Dad nodded. "Chase has a good eye for where the industry is going." I waited. Dad took a drink. Nobody said my name. I could have corrected them. I didn't. I ate another bite of mashed potatoes. That was the version of me my fiancé Noah eventually fell in love with and then gently challenged. Noah Parker taught history at a public high school outside Nashville. He didn't care about business status. He drove an old Honda Accord, owned 6 nearly identical blue shirts, and believed every household disagreement could somehow be improved by ordering pizza. The first time he attended a Lawson dinner, Brooke spent 20 minutes describing the farmhouse she and Chase hoped to build someday. On the drive home, Noah looked at me. "Does she always talk like she's being interviewed?" I laughed so hard I almost spilled coffee. But Noah noticed the things I had trained myself not to notice. My family rarely asked follow-up questions about my life. Dad asked Chase about projects. Mom asked Brooke about decorating. Brooke talked about herself. If I started telling a story about work within a few minutes, someone remembered something Brooke had done. One night after Mom volunteered me to help organize a party, Brooke had not even asked me to organize, Noah said. "You know you're allowed to be loved without being useful, right?" I stared at him. We were sitting on my couch eating leftover pizza. There was nothing dramatic about the moment. That was why it stayed with me. I changed the subject. But the sentence lodged somewhere deep. When Noah proposed, we decided to get married at a renovated brick chapel attached to an old mill outside Franklin. We planned for 118 guests. There would be white flowers, simple wooden tables, barbecue biscuits, roasted vegetables, and lemon cake, because Noah hated fondant. Nothing extravagant, just warm. For reasons I can barely explain now, I still wanted the traditional photograph. My father walking me down the aisle, my mother helping with my dress, my sister standing nearby. A normal family for one day. Dad seemed excited. A week before the wedding, he texted me, "Can't believe I finally get to walk my little girl down that aisle. Try not to make your old man cry." I stared at that message for several minutes. I even took a screenshot. Maybe because some part of me already knew how fragile promises were in our family. Brooke had been difficult throughout the planning. 3 months before the ceremony, she dropped out as a bridesmaid. First, she said the dress color made her look tired. Then she said Chase's schedule was unpredictable. Then she told our cousin that standing in my wedding would be emotionally complicated while her own marriage was going through a difficult period. I told her there was no pressure. That offended her too. "You don't even care whether I'm involved." "I care, I'm just not forcing you." "That is exactly what I mean." "What do you mean?" "You act like you're above all of us." I stared at her across the table. "We are talking about a bridesmaid dress." "No, we're talking about you always pretending you don't need anybody." I almost laughed. "Brooke, I have never said that." "You don't have to." She leaned back. "You moved away. You have your career. You have Noah's perfect little family worshiping you. Honestly, I don't even know why Dad walking you down the aisle matters so much. You've spent your whole adult life proving you don't need this family." That hurt. I tried not to show it. "I never said I didn't need a family." Brooke's expression hardened. "Then maybe you shouldn't have spent so many years acting like you were better than us." That conversation happened 6 days before my wedding. The day before the ceremony, I was at the venue with our coordinator Melissa when Dad called. I smiled when I saw his name. That is the part that still embarrasses me. After everything, I still smiled. "Hey, Dad. Emily, we need to change something tomorrow." His voice was flat. I stepped away from Melissa. "What?" "I don't think I'm going to walk you down the aisle." For a second, I thought he was joking. "What?" "Brooke and Chase had another fight." I closed my eyes. "Of course. She came over this afternoon," Dad continued. "She's a mess." "What does that have to do with the wedding?" "She says the father-daughter part is going to be difficult for her." I looked toward the empty aisle. "Why?" "Because Chase isn't being supportive. She feels like everybody else's life is moving forward while hers is falling apart." "Dad, she's already married." "I know that. So why does watching you walk with me hurt her?" His tone changed. I knew that tone. I had heard it whenever logic made him uncomfortable. "Emily, don't make this harder than it needs to be." "Did she ask you not to walk me?" Silence. "Dad." "Yes." My throat tightened. "A week earlier, my little girl. Now this. And you agreed. She is having a hard time." "I'm getting married tomorrow." "I am aware. I asked you to do one thing." "Emily, I'm not spending tomorrow proving that I love you just because Brooke is struggling." The sentence landed so hard I stopped breathing. Dad continued, irritated now. "You're 30 years old. If walking 50 feet alone ruins your wedding, then honestly you have bigger problems." I looked down at the floor. Then I heard Mom in the background. "Give me the phone." A moment later her voice came through. "Emily, please don't start drama the day before your wedding." I laughed once. "I didn't start anything. Brooke needs your father tomorrow." "And I don't. You have Noah." "That isn't the point. You have his parents, your friends, half your workplace is coming." "Mom, plenty of women walk alone now, it isn't 1950. Dad will literally be sitting in the chapel." "Yes, watching me walk alone." "You are making that sound much uglier than it is." "It is ugly." Mom exhaled sharply. "You always do this." "Do what?" "Turn every inconvenience into proof nobody loves you." That sentence was familiar too. She had said variations of it my whole life. When I was 17, she once grabbed my wrist so hard it left marks because I tried to leave the kitchen while she was defending Brooke. When I complained, she said I was dramatic. My mother wasn't usually violent, but when she felt control slipping away, she became physically intrusive, blocking doorways, grabbing wrists, taking phones out of hands. The message was always the same. You don't leave until I decide this conversation is over. I took a breath. Are you still coming tomorrow? Of course. So Dad is choosing to sit in the audience instead of walking beside me. Emily, I'm asking a yes or no question. You know Brooke is sensitive. There it was. The family password. Sensitive. Brooke was sensitive. I was difficult. Brooke needed understanding. I needed maturity. For 30 years, I had begged for scraps of affection and called it patience. Something inside me became very quiet. Okay, Mom stopped. What? Okay, you understand. No, I looked at the aisle. But I heard you. Emily, I'll see you tomorrow. I hung up. Melissa had pretended to study a seating chart, but she had heard enough. Do you need a minute? No, that answer came too quickly. I corrected myself. Yes. She nodded and walked away. I sat in the front pew. For several minutes, I stared at Dad's text from the week before. My little girl. I didn't cry. Not yet. Noah found me on the back steps an hour later. I told him everything. His jaw tightened. But he didn't call my father. He didn't tell me what to do. He sat beside me. Finally, he asked, "Do you want to walk alone?" No, then don't. I looked at him. Who am I supposed to ask with 18 hours' notice? He gave me a look. I knew before he said anything. You know who? Thomas Reed was 68 years old and ran a custom woodworking shop with his nephew outside town. He had silver hair, thick hands, and a quiet way of listening that made you realize how rarely people actually listened. When I was 9, there had been an old photograph in Dad's office showing him standing beside another young man outside a tiny workshop. Above them was a hand-painted sign, Reed and Lawson Cabinet Works. I asked who the other man was. Dad removed the photograph the next day. The family story said Dad had built Lawson Home and Millwork from nothing. The real story was that Dad and Thomas had started together. Thomas was the craftsman. Dad handled customers and numbers. Then Thomas's wife Ellen got cancer. Thomas spent months caring for her. After she died, he fell apart. Dad kept the business moving and eventually reorganized everything around himself. There had been anger, arguments, broken promises, and things both men regretted. Thomas once admitted something to me that made me trust him more. For a few years, I wanted your dad to lose everything, he said. I'm not proud of it. I was grieving and angry, and revenge seemed easier than admitting I missed the life I had. But Dad did something Thomas could never forgive. He started telling people he had built the company alone. Thomas disappeared from the story. I met Thomas at 24 when he repaired an old walnut rocking chair my grandmother had left me. Burned into the wood underneath were 2 letters, R&L. Thomas had made it. That broken chair reopened a history my family had buried. Over time, Thomas became someone I trusted. He never told me to hate my father. If anything, he sometimes defended Dad more than I wanted. When Noah decided to propose, Thomas made the walnut ring box. He never asked to be my father. He simply showed up often enough that the difference became impossible not to notice. I called him. He answered on the 3rd ring. Hey, kiddo. My throat closed. Are you still coming tomorrow? I bought a suit for it. I almost smiled. Dad isn't walking me down the aisle. Silence. Then, I see. I know this is last minute. Emily, I don't want you getting dragged into something between Dad and me. Emily. I stopped. What are you asking? I stared out at the dark courtyard. Would you walk with me? Thomas didn't answer immediately. When he did, his voice had changed. It would be one of the great honors of my life. That was when I cried. Not when Dad rejected me. Not when Mom dismissed me. When someone said yes without making me earn it. The next morning, Brooke posted a picture of coffee and sunglasses with the caption, "Family first, always." I blocked her stories. My bridesmaids arrived early. Sarah, my college roommate. Jasmine, one of my coworkers. Hannah, Noah's sister. Nobody asked me to explain my family. They opened curtains, ordered pancakes, found safety pins, and argued about music. At 12:30, Melissa entered. Your parents are here. I nodded. Anne, Brooke. I waited. Melissa made a face. She is wearing ivory. Photographs white. Very. Sarah muttered, classy. I surprised myself by smiling. Let her. You sure? Yes. For once I wasn't going to protect Brooke from looking like Brooke. At 1:15, Thomas arrived in his dark blue pickup and parked beside the catering van. No limousine. No dramatic entrance. I wore a navy suit and freshly polished shoes. When he saw me, he stopped. Well, he said quietly, "Would you look at you?" He handed me a small wooden box. Inside was a narrow walnut comb carved with dogwood flowers. "Ellen wore this at our wedding." I stared at him. "I can't take this." "You can." "What about your family?" "They know." I looked at him. "You asked them?" "Of course." That shouldn't have surprised me, but it did. In my family, valuable things came with arguments, history, guilt, and future obligations. Thomas's family had simply decided the comb might make me happy. Melissa appeared. 5 minutes. Thomas offered his arm. I slipped mine through it. I looked at the chapel doors. Nervous. A little. Good. I laughed weakly. Good means it matters. The music changed. The doors opened. The first person I saw was Noah. He stood at the front looking at me like seeing me was good news. Then I saw Dad. His eyes went from me to Thomas. I half stood. His hand crushed the folded wedding program. Mom leaned toward him. "Richard, who is that?" Brooke turned. Her ivory satin dress looked bridal under the chapel lights. When she recognized Thomas, her mouth tightened. "You have got to be kidding me." Noah's grandmother, sitting 2 rows behind her, leaned toward Hannah and whispered loudly enough for several people to hear. "Is the sister wearing white?" Hannah whispered back, "Yep." Noah's grandmother looked Brooke up and down. "Well, that saves everybody a lot of questions." I almost laughed in the middle of the aisle. Thomas and I started walking. Dad stared at us. For years I had imagined walking toward him. Now I was walking past him. Halfway down, I caught myself looking toward his seat. Thomas leaned slightly toward me, eyes forward. I looked back at Noah, eyes forward. At the front, Thomas placed my hand in Noah's. Then he kissed my cheek. "You never needed anybody's permission to belong." My eyes filled. Thomas turned towards the second row. As he passed, Dad leaned toward him. "What are you doing?" Thomas stopped for half a second. "Showing up." Then he kept walking. Nothing else happened. No screaming. No public confrontation. The ceremony continued. That made the moment stronger. For 35 minutes, my family stopped mattering. Noah forgot half a sentence of his vows and laughed. I cried. A motorcycle roared past at exactly the wrong moment. Everybody smiled. When the officiant pronounced us married, Noah kissed me and the room applauded. When we walked back up the aisle, I saw Dad. He no longer looked angry. I looked ashamed. Mom looked furious. Brooke looked like she was saving hers for later. She was. The reception was held across the courtyard. Long wooden tables, white flowers, string lights, barbecue, biscuits, lemon cake. It felt warm. My coworkers danced with Noah's relatives. My boss talked to Thomas about furniture. Noah's father got barbecue sauce on his tie before dinner officially started. For almost 30 minutes, I forgot my family again. Then Mom found me in the bridal room while I was changing shoes. Brooke followed her inside. Mom shut the door. "What exactly were you trying to prove?" I looked at her through the mirror. "I'm going to need more information." "Don't be cute." Brooke folded her arms. "Bringing Thomas was disgusting. You asked Dad not to walk me. I told him I was struggling. And you knew what he would do." Her eyes narrowed. Mom stepped forward. "You embarrassed your father." There it was. Not "we hurt you." Not "we made the wrong choice." You embarrassed your father. Did Dad say he was embarrassed? I didn't have to. Brooke laughed bitterly. "You knew exactly what you were doing. I needed someone beside me. You could have walked alone." I looked at them. "Why was that so important to all of you?" Neither answered. I continued. "You didn't just want Dad to sit down. You needed me to accept it quietly." Brooke rolled her eyes. "You are so dramatic." "No." I looked directly at her. "For once I'm being accurate." Mom grabbed my wrist. "Enough." I pulled away. She stepped closer. "Don't you walk away when I'm talking to you." I reached for the door. Her hand caught my arm again. "Mom, you're not going out there until—" "Let go." Brooke scoffed. "Oh my God." I pulled harder. Mom's frustration flashed. Then she slapped me. The room went silent. My cheek burned. Mom stared at me, breathing hard. Brooke waited. They expected the old Emily. Tears, apologies, a long explanation. I touched my cheek once. Then I looked at Mom. "That is the last time you will ever put your hands on me." Her eyes widened. "Excuse me." "The last time. Don't threaten your mother." "I'm not threatening you." My voice was calm. "I'm telling you what happens now." Brooke laughed. "You've been reading too much therapy Instagram." Maybe I had. Therapy Instagram had still managed to teach me something my family never had. Boundaries did not require a vote. I looked at both of them. For years, Dad called when his website broke. Chase called when he messed up an order. You called when you needed rides, appointments, favors, reservations, help moving things, help fixing things. Mom opened her mouth. I raised a hand. I'm not finished. She actually stopped. I kept doing it because I told myself being useful meant I mattered. My throat tightened. And if I'm being completely truthful, part of me liked being needed. It was the closest thing I had to feeling chosen. Neither woman spoke, but I'm done confusing the two. Brooke frowned. What does that mean? It means I'm not fixing everyone's problems anymore. Mom stared. You're upset. No. We'll talk after the honeymoon. No. Emily. No. The words settled between us. I picked up my flats. I am not freezing bank accounts. I'm not taking anybody's house. I'm not trying to destroy anyone. Brooke rolled her eyes again. I am simply done being the emergency contact for people who treat me like an inconvenience when nothing is wrong. That landed. Mom's face changed. I opened the door. The sounds of the reception flooded in. Before leaving, I looked back. Dad wanted me to learn how to walk without him. I paused. Maybe he finally taught me something useful. Then I left. Noah was waiting near the bar. I took one look at my cheek. What happened? Mom slapped me. His entire expression changed. I touched his arm. I handled it. She hit you. I know. Do you want them gone? I looked across the room. No, Emily. I want them to stay. Why? Because for once I'm not going to save them from themselves. He studied my face, then nodded. Okay. Chase arrived late to the reception hall. I hadn't noticed at first. When I finally saw him, he looked exhausted. His tie was crooked. His eyes were red. He checked his phone 3 times during dinner and barely touched his food. Brooke didn't seem to notice, or didn't want to. 20 minutes later, she walked toward the DJ. When she reached for the microphone, Noah looked at me. I shook my head. Let her. Brooke tapped the microphone. People turned. I know it isn't officially toast time yet. She smiled. But I'm the older sister. I think that gives me certain privileges. A few people laughed politely. Brooke began with harmless stories. How I alphabetized books as a child. How I always followed rules. Then the blade appeared. Emily has always been very independent. Mom smiled from her table. She moved away and built her own life. Some of us stayed close because family legacy means a little more to us. I felt Noah's hand close around mine. Brooke looked toward Dad. Our father spent decades building Lawson Home and millwork, and Chase and I are incredibly proud to help carry that legacy forward. Dad shifted slightly. Brooke continued. And since everybody is here, Chase and I actually have some news. Chase's head snapped up. Brooke. She ignored him. We're getting ready to renovate a farmhouse on 5 beautiful acres outside Leiper's Fork. A few guests clapped. Mom beamed. Chase looked sick. Brooke smiled wider. Big porch. Huge kitchen. Plenty of room for holidays. Someday, hopefully, it'll become the place where everybody gathers. She turned toward me. And Emily, don't worry. We'll always save you a room at Christmas. Several smiles disappeared. Noah whispered, generous. I almost laughed. Brooke raised her glass. So here's to marriage, family, and knowing where you belong. Brooke. Chase stood. She looked at him. What? Give me the microphone. Her smile froze. Why? Please. You're being weird. Brooke. I walked toward her. We need to talk. Later. Now. Her expression changed. What is wrong with you? He said something quietly. I didn't hear it. Brooke did. What do you mean? Chase looked toward the floor. She raised the microphone without realizing. What do you mean we don't have it? The room became still. Chase closed his eyes. Turn the microphone off. The farmhouse. Brooke. What do you mean? I exhaled. The seller accepted another offer. Her mouth opened. When? 6 weeks ago. Dad looked at Chase. Mom stopped smiling. Brooke laughed once. A frightened sound. But you said everything was handled. I said I was trying. You said financing was done. I said I thought I could make it work. Brooke stared at him. There is no farmhouse. No. The silence was brutal. Chase reached for the microphone. Brooke stepped away. What else? Not here. What else? Brooke. What else haven't you told me? He rubbed both hands over his face. Something in him finally broke. There is no money for a farmhouse. Brooke stared. Yes, there is. No. What about Willow Creek? Barely covered subcontractors. The duplex. Sold. The spec house. Still sitting. What about the money Dad put into the company? Dad stood. Enough. Brooke turned. What money? Dad's face changed. Chase looked at him. Brooke noticed. What money? Nobody answered. What money, Dad? Chase finally spoke. Your father has been helping us. Mom stared at Richard. Brooke's face went pale. How much? Brooke. How much? Chase looked exhausted. Maybe 80,000 over 2 years. A gasp moved through several tables. Mom sat down. Brooke stared at Dad. You gave him $80,000. Dad looked around the room. This is a private family matter. I almost laughed. Brooke looked at Chase. You told me your business was paying for our life. I was trying to keep everything going. You lied to me. You didn't want the truth. Her expression became vicious. Don't blame me. I told you we had to slow down. When? The SUV. You told me we could afford it. I told you we could if the next job closed. Yao bought it. Because you didn't speak to me for 4 days when I said no. The microphone carried every word. Brooke looked around. For the first time she realized everybody could hear. Dad moved toward them. Turn that thing off. Chase laughed bitterly. No, Richard. Dad froze. I'm done. Watch your mouth. You want me to keep lying? Dad's face hardened. Chase looked toward me. You want me to tell them who actually kept your showroom functioning when things got bad? My stomach tightened. Dad's eyes went straight to me. Brooke followed his gaze. What does Emily have to do with this? Nobody spoke. Brooke looked at Dad. What does Emily have to do with it? Chase answered. You know those senior living jobs your dad always talks about? Yes. Emily brought the company in. Dad snapped she introduced us. Chase shook his head. And the website? Brooke frowned. Dad hired somebody. No, Emily helped organize it. Dad stepped forward. Chase. The inventory mess. Stop. Emily. Brooke stared at me. Chase continued. I watched her drive down from Nashville every Thursday because Richard was scared his employees were going to lose work. Several showroom employees were at the reception. Carlos looked toward Dad. Dad said she helped. Chase laughed. She did more than help. Dad's jaw tightened. Brooke looked at him. You told everyone Chase modernized the showroom. Dad said nothing. Chase did. I borrowed trailers and got discounted cabinets. Brooke turned toward me. Why didn't you tell me? I almost laughed. When? What does that mean? When would you have liked me to tell you? She stared. Christmas when Mom told everybody Chase saved Dad's business. Mom looked down. Thanksgiving when Dad introduced Chase as the future. Dad's face reddened. Your anniversary dinner when you told me I didn't understand what building something felt like. Brooke flushed. I didn't know. No, I looked at her. You never asked. That distinction landed harder than I expected. Dad turned toward me. This is your wedding. Do you really want to do this? I stared at him. You mean talk about family in public? His face hardened. Don't be smart. Brooke grabbed the microphone. This has gone far enough. No. Mom looked at me. What? I turned toward Dad. Did Brooke ask you not to walk me down the aisle? The room went completely still. Dad looked around. This isn't appropriate. Did she? Mom said Emily. I ignored her. Dad finally answered. She was upset. That isn't what I asked. His jaw tightened. Yes. Brooke looked at him. I nodded. And you agreed. I made a decision as a father. My throat tightened. Yes. I looked at him. You did. That changed the room. Dad's expression flickered. I continued. You had 2 daughters yesterday. One daughter told you watching you love the other one for 60 seconds would hurt her feelings. Brooke interrupted. That isn't what I said. I turned. Then what did you say? She opened her mouth. Nothing came out. Dad said you were never alone. That wasn't your decision. You're twisting this. No. I shook my head. For the first time in my life, I'm refusing to twist it into something kinder than it was. Dad looked at me. I could feel my hands shaking, but my voice didn't. I don't need anybody here to choose sides. This isn't a courtroom. I looked around the room. And I'm not turning my wedding into a trial. Then I looked back at Dad. But you should hear one thing. He stared. Yesterday I wanted my father. My voice caught. Today I just want you to stop taking credit for the daughter you refused to stand beside. Nobody moved. Dad looked like the sentence had physically hit him. Mom whispered Emily. I wasn't finished. Noah stepped beside me. Dad looked toward him. If Emily wants independence, fine. There was his anger again. She can have it. No more coming to me when she needs something. Noah actually laughed. Dad snapped his head toward him. What? Noah shook his head. Nothing. No, say it. Noah looked at me. I nodded. Then he faced Dad. When was the last time Emily called you because she needed something? Dad stared. Noah continued. When her water heater broke, my dad helped. Dad said nothing. When we moved, her co-workers helped. He nodded toward Thomas. When the dining table cracked, Tom helped. Dad's face tightened. Noah kept going. When your website stopped processing orders before Christmas, who called whom? Dad looked at me. When Chase ordered the wrong cabinets and needed somebody to fix it, who called whom? Chase looked down. When Diane needed a ride to her outpatient procedure because you had a supplier meeting, who called whom? Mom's eyes widened. Noah's voice stayed calm. Emily doesn't call this family when she needs rescuing. Then he delivered the sentence that finally removed the last excuse. This family calls Emily. Dad stared at him. I looked at Dad. And that's over. Silence. Then Brooke laughed. A hard, bitter sound. So what? Everybody looked at her. So Emily fixed some spreadsheets. Chase closed his eyes. Brooke. No. Her voice rose. She loves this. I stared. She has wanted everyone to feel sorry for her our entire lives. Stop, Chase said. You want honesty. Brooke pointed at me. She's exhausting. She always has been. She keeps score. She acts like she's better than everybody because she has some boring job and Noah's family thinks she's wonderful. I felt the old wound open. Then something surprising happened. I didn't need to defend myself. Everyone had heard her. She continued. You want to know why Dad comes to me? Her face twisted. Because I'm warm, I'm fun, I actually enjoy this family. Brooke, Dad said quietly. She ignored him. You want to know why Dad didn't walk you? The room seemed to shrink. Brooke stepped closer. Because when I called him yesterday, he chose me. She smiled. There it was. Not sensitivity. Not pain. Victory. Dad looked at her. His face changed completely. Brooke. She turned. What? That's enough. Her smile disappeared. What? I said enough. You're taking her side. No. Yes, you are. Dad rubbed his face. Sit down. Brooke stared at him like he had betrayed her. I did everything you wanted. Dad looked up. I stayed here. I married someone you liked. I came to every family dinner. Chase gave a tired laugh. You didn't help with the business. Brooke spun toward him. Shut up. No. I looked strangely calm. No, I'm done. Her eyes widened. You did not build my company. I did not build Richard's. Emily didn't ruin our finances. Richard didn't ruin our marriage. He swallowed. We did. Brooke stared. I kept saying yes because I was scared of what happened when I said no. Her eyes filled. Don't. The car. Stop. The vacations. Chase. The farmhouse. She slapped him. Hard. The sound cracked through the room. Chase didn't move. Then he nodded. Exactly. Brooke looked around as if suddenly remembering the audience. Her face crumpled. She ran toward the hallway. Mom immediately followed. Of course she did. My instinct screamed at me to go after them. Calm, Brooke. Stop, Mom. Clean up the disaster. Then Noah squeezed my hand. I stayed. Dad remained standing. For the first time in my life, he did not follow Brooke either. Thomas had been quiet through everything. Dad suddenly turned toward him. This is what you wanted. Thomas stood. No. You've been waiting 27 years for this. Thomas's jaw tightened. For the first time that day, anger broke through his calm. You think I needed to destroy your family? Dad stared. Thomas took a breath. I spent years wanting you to lose that business, Rick. I'm not proud of that. That silenced Dad. I was angry. I was grieving. I hated you. Thomas stepped closer. But that passed. Dad looked skeptical. You know what didn't pass? Thomas pointed toward me. Watching you do to your daughter what you did to me. Dad's face hardened. You stay out of my family. I stayed out of your family for 27 years. Thomas's voice lowered. Every time Emily came to my shop hurt by something you did, I told her to give you more grace than you deserved. Dad glanced at me. Thomas continued. She wanted a father, Rick. Not your store, not your money, not her name on your building. He paused. You. Dad looked away. Thomas nodded toward me. She helped you because she loved you. Then when things improved, you told the story without her in it. Dad's expression changed. Thomas's voice softened. That was always your talent. What? Erasing the person who helped you build something so you could stand alone in the photograph. That hit. Dad stared. Thomas continued. You did it to me. Then he looked toward me. And you almost did it to her. Dad said quietly. I thanked her. I finally spoke. When? His eyes moved toward me. What? When did you thank me? I shouldn't have to document conversations with my daughter. No. I nodded. You shouldn't. I waited. When? He had no answer. I could see shame settling where anger had been. Mom's voice echoed faintly from the hallway where Brooke was crying. For once, nobody moved to rescue them. The microphone was still lying on the table. I picked it up. Then I set it back down without speaking into it. My boss, Linda, stood. Well, people turned. She raised her glass slightly. I've worked with Emily for 6 years. I stared at her. She is terrible at asking for help and sometimes too good at giving it. A few people laughed. Linda smiled at me. But there are people who see what you do, Emily. That was all. No grand speech. She sat down. And somehow those few words almost broke me more than everything else. Noah's father raised his glass. Then Sarah. Then Jasmine. The room slowly followed. Not applause for revenge. Not celebration of my family collapsing. Recognition. I realized something in that moment. Being overlooked by the wrong people had never meant I was invisible. The wedding continued. That mattered. We ate cake. Noah and I danced. His father stepped on my dress. My co-workers dragged Thomas onto the dance floor. The world did not end because my family embarrassed itself. An hour later, I went outside for air. Dad followed. For several seconds, we stood quietly in the courtyard. I looked tired. Not ruined. Not defeated. Just old. Your mother is taking Brooke home. Okay. Chase left. I nodded. Dad put his hands in his pockets. You made your point. I looked at him. I got married. You know what I mean? No. He sighed. You brought Tom. I asked someone to walk with me. You knew what it would do. I knew what it would do to me if I walked alone just to protect your feelings. Dad stared. That shut him up. I took a breath. I'm done helping at the showroom. His head lifted. Emily. Carlos has the support number. The IT company has the passwords. You know what they charge? Yes. What about the projects through your company? They'll use normal bidding. His face changed. You're pulling us. No. I shook my head. I don't own those buildings. I'm not punishing 20 employees because I'm angry at my father. He relaxed slightly. But I'm removing myself. What does that mean? It means your business wins work the same way everybody else's does. He stared. And Chase doesn't call me for emergencies anymore. Brooke may need help. I almost laughed. Then help her. His expression hardened. I have been. I know. Silence. Dad looked toward the reception windows. Then he asked, what do you want from me? I thought about the question. For most of my life, the answer had been everything. See me. Choose me. Thank me. Love me correctly. That night, something had changed. Nothing tonight. I looked at me. That can't be true. It is. I swallowed. Yesterday, I wanted you to walk me down the aisle. His eyes dropped. Tonight, I want to go dance with my husband. I left him standing there. On our honeymoon in Charleston, Mom called 17 times. Her first voicemail said Brooke had barely stopped crying. Her third said I had humiliated the family. Her sixth said the ordering system at Dad's showroom had stopped working and Carlos couldn't fix it. No apology. A task. Brooke's first message said, you ruined my marriage. Her fourth said, do you know anyone who can look at Chase's business expenses? I stared at the message. Noah looked over. What are you going to do? The old answer arrived automatically. Call somebody. Recommend an accountant. Fix it. I put the phone face down. Nothing. The word frightened me. Then it felt peaceful. A week after we came home, Dad called from a different number. I answered. The website is down, he said. The support number is taped inside your desk. They want $1,200 for an emergency visit. That sounds about right. You used to fix it. Yes. For free. Yes. Silence. Emily. No, I haven't asked. You were about to. His voice hardened. You're really doing this over one aisle. I closed my eyes. No, Dad. What then? Because after 30 years, you still think this is about 50 feet of carpet. I ended the call gently. Months passed. Nobody became homeless. Lawson Home and Millwork didn't collapse. Dad hired someone part-time to manage systems. Hun hated paying for help he had once received for free. He stopped giving Chase materials at nearly cost. Brooke sold the SUV. She and Chase separated. Mom posted fewer family photographs because posting without me created questions she didn't want to answer. I missed my first Lawson Thanksgiving. Instead, Noah and I hosted 11 people in our townhouse. Thomas came. Sarah came. Jasmine brought her mother. Noah's parents brought too much food. His father burned the first batch of rolls. Nobody warned me not to mention good news because someone else might be jealous. Nobody told me to be the bigger person. Nobody monitored Brooke's mood because Brooke wasn't there. Halfway through dinner, Thomas caught me looking around. What? Nothing. You're waiting for the disaster. I laughed. Maybe. He passed me the gravy. Give it time. Noah's dad hasn't carved the turkey yet. I laughed harder. That was when I understood healing was rarely cinematic. Sometimes healing was burned bread and gravy. 2 weeks before Christmas, Brooke appeared at my townhouse. No makeup, jeans, sweater. She looked tired. "Then I come in?" I stepped onto the porch instead. Her face fell. "Seriously, what do you need?" She crossed her arms against the cold. "Chase and I separated. I heard." "Of course you did. I am sorry." She laughed bitterly. "No, you're not." "Yes, I am." She studied me, then looked toward the street. "He says I made him feel like a failure all the time." I waited. "He says nothing was enough." Still I waited. Finally she looked at me. "Do you think that's true?" "Yes." Her face tightened. I continued. "I think you learned very young that disappointment made people move. That makes me sound manipulative. I think you were rewarded for manipulating people." She took a step back. "So this is why I came. You asked?" Brooke looked down. After a long silence, she said, "I hated that you were happy." That surprised me. She swallowed. "Chase and I had been fighting for months. Mom kept talking about your wedding. Dad kept saying Noah was such a good guy." Her eyes filled. "And I kept thinking everyone would look at you and think you did everything right. Why did my happiness have to mean you failed?" Brooke laughed sadly. "Because that's how this family works." We both went quiet. Then she said something I had never known. "When you got good grades, Mom told me I was prettier." I stared. "When you got promoted, she reminded me I had the better marriage." My throat tightened. "When you bought your townhouse, Dad told me someday I'd have part of the business." She looked at me. "Every time something good happened to you, they gave me something so I wouldn't feel less important." I felt sick. Brooke wiped her cheek. And I liked it. There it was. Honesty. I liked knowing they'd pick me. She swallowed. "Especially over you." Pain moved through me. But I didn't run from it. "Thank you for saying that," Brooke cried. "I'm sorry. I had waited years for those words. They didn't magically fix us." "I believe you're sorry right now." Her face fell slightly. "Right now. An apology is the beginning, Brooke, not the proof." She nodded slowly. That was the first honest conversation we had ever had. Not reconciliation. The possibility of it. My father took longer. 8 months after the wedding, his truck pulled into my driveway while Noah and I were working in the yard. Dad got out and lifted an old wooden board from the truck bed. The faded red letters were still visible. "Reed and Lawson Cabinet Works." I stared. "Where did you find that?" "Warehouse loft." He leaned it against the porch. "I thought I'd thrown it away." "You kept it." "Apparently." We stood quietly. Then Dad said Tom should have it. "You can give it to him." Dad looked uncomfortable. "I thought you could." "No." He frowned. "Why?" "Because it isn't my apology." That stopped him. Dad stared at the sign. Then he sat on the porch step. "I've been seeing a therapist." I looked at him. He noticed my expression. "You could try to look less shocked." "Sorry." "No, you're not." For half a second we both smiled. Then he looked down. He asked why I always said Brooke was sensitive and you were strong. I stayed quiet. I told him because it was true. Dad rubbed his hands together. He asked whether strong children stop needing parents. My eyes burned. I didn't like him much that day. I laughed softly. Dad nodded. He asked why I told people I built the business alone. I looked at the old sign. I said because eventually I ran it alone. I took a breath. Then he asked why that meant Tom stopped existing. Dad swallowed. I didn't have an answer. We sat there. Then he looked at me. "I think I made you pay for being easier." My throat tightened. There it was. Specific. True. No excuse. "Yes." He nodded. "I know." He stared toward the yard. And I'm sorry I didn't walk you down the aisle. My eyes filled. Not because Tom did. I looked at me. Not because people talked. His voice broke slightly. Because you asked me to be your father that day, and I treated it like a scheduling problem. I wiped my cheek. Dad looked at his hands. I can't fix that. No. What can I fix? I thought about it. Your next decision. I looked at me. That is about all anybody gets. Dad nodded. I did not ask about the website. He did not ask when I would come home for dinner. I didn't mention Brooke. When he left, the old sign remained on my porch. I called Thomas. He came over that afternoon. When he saw the board, he stopped. For a long time, he didn't speak. Then he touched the faded letters. Where? Dad. Thomas looked at me. He brought it. Yes. Why didn't he bring it to me? He's scared. Thomas snorted. Good. I smiled. He says it belongs to you. Thomas traced the old lettering, then shook his head. No. What? I don't want it. Thomas. I spent years wanting that thing back. His eyes became wet. Turns out it was never the sign. I understood. You wanted him to admit you were there. Thomas nodded. That's all. A week later, Dad called him. I never asked what they said. That was their story. They didn't suddenly become best friends again. Dad apologized. Thomas didn't immediately forgive him. I respected that. Forgiveness isn't a vending machine where someone inserts an apology and gets access to your life. Mom changed less. For almost 2 years, she blamed everybody else. Thomas, Noah, Dad's therapist, Brooke's divorce, my boundaries. One Christmas, I met her for lunch. Halfway through, she sighed. I don't understand why this family has to be divided like this. I set down my fork. That's exactly the problem. What? You still describe my boundaries as the thing that divided the family. She frowned. They did. No. I looked at her. The boundaries came after the things that made them necessary. Mom rolled her eyes. There you go again with therapy language. I stood. I'm going home. Her face changed. Emily, sit down. No. You don't walk away from your mother. I picked up my coat. That's another thing that's changed. I paid my half of the check. The next time we had lunch, she didn't say it again. People learn what you will tolerate when you stop explaining and start leaving. Brooke changed more slowly than I wanted, and more honestly than I expected. She eventually divorced Chase and began working at a small interior design studio. Not as an owner, not as an influencer, as an employee. A year later, she called to tell me she had been promoted to project coordinator. I know it's not a big deal, she said. It sounds like a big deal. She was quiet. You don't think it's pathetic that I'm 35 and excited about a normal job? No. I smiled. I think normal is underrated. She laughed. That became one of our first conversations that didn't contain a winner. Dad changed the Lawson Home and Millwork website too. Under our story. The first paragraph now said the business had begun decades earlier as Reed and Lawson Cabinet Works, founded by Richard Lawson and Thomas Reed. Thomas's name was back. Farther down was a short thank you to employees and family members who had helped the company adapt. My name appeared once. Emily Lawson Parker. No giant title, no dramatic confession, just the truth. For years I thought recognition would feel like victory. It didn't. It felt quiet, almost sad. Because once you stop needing something, finally receiving it doesn't fill the old hole. It only proves the hole was real. 2 years after my wedding, Noah and I hosted Thanksgiving again. Thomas came. Noah's parents came. Sarah came with her fiancé. Jasmine brought dessert. Brooke came carrying sweet potatoes. Dad came too. Mom chose not to because Thomas would be there. That was her decision. At one point, I stood in the kitchen and watched Dad and Thomas arguing about the correct way to sharpen a plane blade. Brooke was helping Noah wash dishes. Nobody was performing. Nobody was competing. Nobody disappeared so someone else could shine. Later that evening, Dad stood in our living room looking at the wedding photograph on the shelf. The photograph was taken seconds before the chapel doors opened. I was wearing my dress. My arm was through Thomas's. Dad stared at it for a long time. I hate that picture. My stomach tightened. Then he said, because that should have been me. I said nothing. I touched the edge of the frame. But I'm glad somebody was there. That was as close to peace as we had ever come. I used to believe revenge meant making people feel the pain they gave you. I don't anymore. My family didn't lose everything. My father kept his business. Brooke rebuilt her life. My mother still had her house, her church friends, and most of her opinions. Nobody was destroyed, but something did end. The assumption that I would always absorb the cost. The assumption that Brooke could be cruel and I would translate it into sensitivity. The assumption that Dad could erase my contribution and still expect my labor. The assumption that Mom could grab my arm, insult me, or slap me, and then demand access because she was my mother. And my own assumption that if I kept becoming more useful, more patient, more competent, more forgiving, one day I would finally become easy to love. That was the part I had to destroy. My parents spent most of my childhood teaching me that strength meant needing less, crying less, complaining less, helping more, taking the smaller portion, changing my plans, being the bigger person, walking alone if necessary. But strong children still need parents. Strong adults still need love. And independence doesn't mean proving you can walk through life without anyone. It means choosing who is allowed to walk beside you. My father's idea of legacy used to be a showroom, a sign, and a last name printed on trucks. Mine is different. Legacy is what people remember feeling around you. Were they safe? Were they valued? Could they succeed without being punished for making someone else insecure? Could they say no and still belong? Family isn't the group of people who demand that you shrink so somebody else can feel taller. Family is the people who can sit at your table without asking anyone else to disappear. My father refused to walk me down the aisle because my sister wanted to know he would choose her over me. For years, I would have called that the day I lost my family. Now I see it differently. It was the day the pattern finally became impossible to ignore. Dad expected me to walk alone. I didn't. And that was the lesson. You do not prove your strength by walking alone, simply because someone who should have loved you refused to stand beside you. You look around. You recognize the people who have already been showing up, and you stop chasing the arm that keeps pulling away. If your father refused to walk you down the aisle just to protect the feelings of the golden child in your family, could you ever forgive him? And who would you have asked to walk beside you? For me, those 50 feet were not the moment I lost my family. They were the first 50 feet of the life I finally chose for myself.